Good everyone, and welcome to another Blender Guru tutorial. Finally back, and I'm showing you in this video how to create a cave. So this is the finished result that you can see in front of you. So we're going to be doing a whole bunch of cool stuff, some basic modeling, some texturing materials, as well as displacements, as well as creating these crystal gem thing in the foreground, as well as these glowing mushrooms, having a whole bunch of fun and learning stuff along the way. So first of all, I'm going to show you what the finished scene actually looks like. So this is it right here, and I'll just zoom out so you can see what it's all made up of. It looks like a big long stick or a chocolate bar. And up this end you can see what the hiker is looking at. He's looking at a very disturbing image down through the barren lands of that cave there. And I should say also, I'm not actually going to be showing you any of the stuff at this background here. I'm going to leave that up to you. You can add whatever you like here. What we're going to be doing is creating just what you can see right here. So the gemstones, the actual cave itself, these stalagmites, these icicle-looking things from the ceiling there, glowing mushrooms, and all that cool stuff. So yeah, before we get started, I thought I'd just show you sort of where the inspiration or whatever came from. Yeah, I've been off, I don't know what, 2 months now from the last tutorial, I guess. And I was at the Blender conference, but as well as that, I went to the UK to visit my grandparents. And whilst I was there, I went and checked out a place called Cheddar Gorge, which is home of the cheddar cheese, which is why I wanted to go there. And it's sort of like near Bristol, if anyone's sort of in the UK. Anyone out there? Hello? Anyways, while we were there, I was there for the cheese, but there's also apparently some cool caves. So we went and had a look inside, and yeah, it's this really interesting experience. This pitch doesn't do it justice, but it looks like a cathedral inside. I don't know how long you know, something like this would have to have taken to form, but it's just remarkable to see it in person. Just crazy formations, and to be the first person to discover this stuff would just be just crazy, you know. And also check this out. This is actual cheddar cheese being matured inside a cave. So this is actually how they used to do it back in the old days, because apparently this cave stays at a constant 11 degrees Celsius all throughout the year, making it sort of like an almost refrigerator, I guess. So it's like perfect for maturing cheese. So they just, yeah, this is how they used to mature the cheese. And that's how we now have cheddar cheese today. By the way, if you're wondering what this thing is, it was like for Halloween. Apparently the UK is now into Halloween as well. I didn't realize that when I went, but yeah, they're getting crazy about it. Yeah, so anyways, there it is. Look, cheddar cheese. And boy, did I buy a lot of cheese. Delicious stuff. I envy anybody who lives in Europe or anything like that. You guys have the best cheeses. So without further ado, let's go ahead and make that full screen and get into Blender. So let's get cracking. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the default cube and the lamp, and I'm going to replace it with a cylinder. And this cylinder, I'm going to rotate it by 90 degrees. And this is going to be our cave. So I want to stretch this along the y-axis, but it's important that we get the depth correctly, because it needs to be a certain length. You know, you can't just sort of make it like 5 meters or something like that, and it, you know, it can sort of, it won't look right. We need to make it look long from the point of view of the camera. So, but the problem is you can see that if I just stretch this, you know, along the y-axis, this values here, like you can see these values are just arbitrary, you know, doesn't really tell you anything in the real world what any of this stuff means. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the units of my scene, something that a lot of people still don't realize you can do, but you can do this. You go to the scene panel, that's the word I'm looking for in all that jumbled mess, and I'm going to click on metric, as you all should, even you Americans. It is the future, embrace it. And now you can see these values are changed to something readable, like 2 meters. I'm going to apply the rotation, by the way, so that when I now scale this along the y-axis, you can see that the y value here is changing. So what I want to do is I want to make my cave 30 meters long. So I'm just going to type in 30, and there you go. And what I'm also going to do now is I'm going to just go into edit mode, and I'm going to move this up along the Z axis, holding down control, and you can see that it's now snapped to that that origin point and that grid floor, whatever, or it's going up 1 unit. But anyways, so it's right there. And I'm also just going to just stretch this out to be 3 meters in the X axis. So it looks like it's like the ceiling is a little bit more crushed in than the outer parts. So sort of gives it a little bit more of a claustrophobic sort of feeling. And also it'll allow you to see the stalagmites, those icicle things from the ceiling, a little bit better. So now that we've done that, let's go, and what we want to do is we want to position the camera at this end of the tunnel. So in front view, I'm going to hit Control Alt number pad 0, and there we go. Look at that. The camera has now snapped to that location, and I'm now just going to position it around about there, and we're making progress. So next thing I want to do is I want to, with our camera here selected, I want to turn on the rule of thirds composition guide. And the reason I want to do this is I want to make the entrance for our cave to be at this point right there, okay? So the way I'm going to do that is, well, actually, first we need to give it some geometry. Because if I was to just grab this and move that up there, you can see that we've now just got a very straight looking cave. So what I want to do is to make it look sort of curvy looking shaped, is I'm going to give it some geometry. So I'm going to add a loop cut. So you do that by hitting Control R, and you can scale this up along the, scale it up or down by using the mouse wheel. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that we get square faces. And it's important that we get square faces because when we use the displacement modifier, if you get rectangular faces, then what you get is like a stretched looking texture. So we don't want that. So what I found to work for this scene is 100 cuts. So you can scroll that all the way up to 100. By the way, you can tell this in the bottom left-hand corner. It'll actually tell you the number of cuts. So I'm just going to type in 100 and then hit enter. And then just right click so that it, or left click, whatever you've got as your defaults. I've now set my my inputs to left click to select now because yeah, that's what I'm feeling. So now we've got some square faces now. Excellent. So now that I've done that, I'm going to delete this face at the end there. And now if I split this view here and go into, let's say, top view, yeah. And if I turn on proportional editing by hitting O, now I can increase this, the fall off of this proportional editing with my mouse wheel. And I want to just sort of move this over to be about there and upwards, I guess. So something like that. And I also just want to rotate it a little bit so that it's the sunlight is able, because I'm going to place the sun sort of shining in down this angle. So I'm sort of just moving it a little bit. Yeah, just a little bit like that. And there we go. So now is the interesting part. This is where we actually get to start fooling around with the geometry of the cave, sort of giving it. This is where we get creative. Okay, so if you want to add like a little sort of like a bunker off to the left-hand side here, you can do that. And I'm actually going to just stretch this opening out here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a column in around about there, or up there, whatever. But anyways. So what you want to do is you just using the proportional fall off is you can add like little dips and little stuff from the ceiling, something like that. That could look kind of cool. We're going to be using a subsurf modifier as well, so don't worry about if anything looks really sharp at this point. And really all we're doing is just trying to make it look like a natural cave. So if you want to have a look at some reference photos online, you're welcome to do that. I mean, there's all different types of caves as well. So there's like really like dirt ones, and then there's ones that are like, I mean, there's like underwater caves. I mean, there's some that are just huge, ginormous things that look like cathedrals inside. So you can get all sorts of cool little formations. The one I'm sort of going for is, I guess, your standard sort of, where you'd find a pirate's treasure sort of look, like a stony, sort of rocky sort of look. It's very damp inside. There's a lot of moisture in caves, I've noticed, which is, I think, is where you get those stalagmites from, those icicles from the ceiling. So yeah, so, all right, so I'm just sort of playing around with the shape of the cave, and you can go into as much detail as you want with this part here. I did a lot of fooling around with my cave, but this is sort of looking okay as it is. And this part here, I just want to sort of create a nice little dip here. Or actually, maybe just... Anyways, I'm going to put a crystal, like a gem, like right here. So I want it to be sort of like, make it look like it's sort of hidden just a little bit away from the entrance. So anyways, the next thing I said I was going to do is I was going to add a column, didn't I? I was going to add a column, and columns can actually form in real life. It's not like a fantasy sort of look, although it does sort of have that look. So something around about here. So the way I'm going to do this is in top view, if you just select 2 vertices and then delete those vertices, and then if you hold down Shift and Alt and then select those 2 edge loops, then if you hit W and select Bridge Edge Loops, you now get a wonderful looking column. So now I want to give it a little bit more shape. I don't want it to look like a big old concrete looking thing. So I'm going to add in some loop cuts here, just like that. And what I'm going to do, whoops, turn off proportional editing, is I want to make it look like an actual column would form in real life. Now, I'm not a haven't studied caves or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure the way that these columns form is by drops, so dripping from the top of the ceiling, where you get those stalagmites, those little icicles, and if it drips for a long enough time, then it starts to pool at the bottom, and you get this sort of like calcified sort of buildup. And then eventually it reaches the point where it's dripping from. And then you get this sort of weird looking sort of column. So that's sort of the idea of this. So you want it to be really thin at the top and really thick at the bottom. In fact, this was actually brought to my attention when I originally posted it on Twitter. And someone said that the column looked really fake because I made it look sort of like curved like that. It looks sort of like a fantasy sort of looking column. So sort of going for something that looks a little bit more realistic. So this is something that I found, I don't know, I think it works a little bit better. I don't know. Somebody will tell me it's wrong, or I don't know. Whatever. Okay, so that's pretty good. But it's very squarish. So what I'm going to do is in top view right here, I'm just going to make this more rounded. Okay, so if I just pull these, just pull them out one by one, like so. And this one here as well. So just trying to make that look like a circle. It doesn't have to be exact. As you can tell, it's not. But yeah, something like that. And then if I add a subsurf modifier, hotkey, Control 1, then you can see everything is looking nice and smoothed and everything's going well. Okay, so next step, whilst we're in the editing sort of mood of things, is we're going to UV unwrap the entire cave. Now, why do we need to UV unwrap it? Well, if you want to add any sort of decent texturing or any sort of decent displacements as well, because it's going to affect the displacements, you need to UV unwrap it, okay? So you might think something like this is going to be really hard to do, but it's actually quite surprisingly easy. So really all we need to do is we need to create one seam just along the entire column like that. And it needs to be in a place which isn't going to be that obvious to the viewer, because once you add in the displacement and if the text is viewable to the viewer, then people are going to be able to see that there is a seam there and it's not going to look so good. So I'm adding it here because it's sort of in the shadows in the dark, because the light is going to be hitting this left-hand side here. So this is a good place to create a seam, okay? And as well as that, of course, this big face here, that is going to be a problem if we don't create a seam there. So I'm going to make a seam there. And also the last place is this actual column that we've created as well, because now it's actually like this sort of complex, part that's joining the middle of the cylinder. That would give us really horrendous UV unwrapping. So I'm making a seam and just sort of cutting out the entire column, like so. I mean, a lot of people sort of stress over UV unwrapping, and I suppose it is very important if you're doing something like a face character, a face of a character. Then it is really important to get the UV unwrapping, but I mean, really it just needs to work for your scene. Like, I mean, this is a still image, it's one image, so it's doesn't have to be perfect. I usually just half-ass it, and then by the end of it, I finish the image and I go, oh yeah, I guess that terrible UV unwrapping job that I did actually paid off. So anyway, all right, so now that I've done that, I'm gonna hit U and then select unwrap. And you can see, look at that, we get a horrible looking result. Doesn't that look awful? So the reason for that is that this is we haven't applied the scale of it. So we scaled this crazy along the lengthways, right? So now that UV unwrapping is sort of going by that weird scaling. So these values here, these values need to be all 1 whenever you're doing UV unwrapping for anything. So normally, I think it actually gave me a warning. Did it give me? Oh, there you go. In the top right-hand corner, it says object has non-uniform scale. So if it ever says that, you need to just hit Control A, apply the scale. And now these numbers are all 1, which means that now you can see we get a correct, more correct-ish looking UV unwrap. Okay, so I'm just going to rotate that by 90 degrees. And you can see it's a little bit squished, sort of in the horizontal axes. So I'm just going to hit S, then X, and then holding down Control, I'm just going to extrude that, scale that to 1.5. If you look in the bottom left-hand corner there, it says 1.5. Okay. And then I'm going to hit S and 4. So I'm going to scale that by 4. Now the reason I'm doing that is I'm going to be using a seamless tileable texture. So it won't actually matter that this is sort of overlapping. So I do mostly tileable textures for everything. So yeah, I'm scaling this up so that it's like that. Okay. Okay, so now looking at it from the camera point of view, now we can actually get into the, well, I was going to say the materials, but doing the materials now would be pretty pointless because there's no lighting. So let there be light, as it was once said. So first things first, I'm going to talk about something that's pretty cool that I've only just sort of discovered. Blender has a cool feature. I don't know if it's new or if it's, I've only just discovered it. Go to a new layer, all right? And go to the world panel over here. Set this to node editor, all right? And I'm going to go ahead and click on use nodes. And then here, click on this world icon. So we're now looking at the world node editor. Now, you can see with the world panel here, you've got the color. So this is the color of the background, right? And normally what I would do is I would use an environment texture like an HDR, but I decided to experiment with something called a sky texture, which I think was just improved or just added by Thomas Dingus. I think he mentioned that to me at the conference, that weird little fellow Dingus I talked about in the podcast. Yeah, no, he's working on stuff. So yeah, anyway, go ahead and click on sky texture. I think it was him anyway. I don't know. Okay, so I'm going to go and just go into rendered view mode. And you can see this is what it actually looks like. Ta-da! It looks like an actual sky, doesn't it? It's pretty cool. It's not too bad. And what we can do with this little sphere here is you can actually click this and drag it around, and this will change the position where Blender thinks the sun is. So that is kind of cool, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to position it to be just to the right, about there, okay? And then there's this turbidity. This is going to change the atmospheric decay, you could say, which is, you know, like when the sun is on the horizon, it changes to like, you know, crazy colors, orange and pink and stuff. That's because it's passing through more particles in the air. So you're getting interesting colors. So turning this up is going to make it look more like a sunset, which is what we want. So a value of around about 5 or 6, yeah, it looks pretty good. So that's the sort of, that's what I'm trying to go for with this cave image. I want to go for something which is a sort of a sunset look. So we've got warm colors coming in through that opening there. I'm going to turn up the strength of it to be 25, which you think is crazy, but it's actually pretty good for this scene. Now you can see you're getting a lot of this speckledy firefly nonsense. So what you want to do then is turn on multiple importance sample. Now multiple importance sample is something I can't even pretend to acknowledge or sort of understand. I have no idea what it does, but I know that you use it whenever you're using an environment texture like an HDR lighting, or in this case a sky texture, and it'll take it a little bit longer to render, but you'll get less fireflies, so obviously it is superior. So I'm turning that on, and you can see just with this actual this sky texture, this is the lighting that we're getting. So already it's pretty good. The next thing I'm going to do is add in a sun lamp. All right, so I'm going to add in a sun lamp right here. And I want this to be shining down into our cave here so that we actually get the light sort of reflecting off the material, off the sort of the walls of the cave, I should say. Okay, and for the sun, I'm going to give it a strength of 6, which is pretty high, and I'm going to give it a color of an orangey pink color. Like that, something like that's pretty cool. Oh, and the size of it, I'm going to set that to 5 centimeters. The size applies to the size of the shadows, even though that is not clear from this there should be something there that says shadow size. Anyway, I'm getting into UI stuff again. Oh yeah, I just hit Control S without even sort of unconsciously. Go ahead and save it whilst you can, you know, always a good rule of thumb. And let's go ahead and give this a render, and let's see how this all looks. Ta-da! So that yellow light is obviously coming from the sky, and this orange light is coming from the sun. But, you know, overall, it's looking pretty good. Not too bad. Cool. So now, finally, we can get to the texturing of the cave. So, switch this back to the object node view, okay? And with our cave here selected, you can see we've added a material, and I'm just going to call the material cave, all right? So, first thing we want to do is we want to give it an image texture. Now, this image texture that I'm going to use is one which you can download if you're watching this on Blender Guru. It's from CG Textures. It's this one right here. And what I've done is I've taken that and I've put it into Crazy Bump, and I've just generated a displacement map, which we're going to use later, a normal map for the bump mapping, which we're going to use later as well, and a specularity map, which we're also going to use. It also generates an occlusion map, which I don't think I've ever used, and we're not going to use it here. But anyways, so to start with, we're going to use the color map, okay? So this is the actual texture. Load this in, and I'm going to connect this to the diffuse right there. And let's just take a look at how this looks with just the diffuse. There you go. You can see it's already starting to look like rock, even though we haven't got any displacements or any interesting modeling or anything like that. It's already starting to look like rock, which is good. All right, so next step. We want it to look like a shiny cave, right? We want it to look damp, like an actual cave does. So the way to do that is to add a glossy shader. So we're going to add this in, and as you always do when you combine it with a diffuse, is you use a mix shader to combine the two together. And look at that, doesn't that look like a silky golden cave? It looks horrible. All right, so turn the roughness down to 0.1. And the reason this is coming out as so shiny at the moment is because it's 50-50 diffuse and glossy, which is obviously way too high for pretty much everything. So next thing I'm going to do is add in another image texture. And this one, we're going to use the texture that I generated right here. This is the specularity map. So the black values of this image are where there's going to be no reflection, and the pure white values are where there's going to be lots of reflection. So it just gives you a better looking material by the end of it, right? Now for this, you want to set this to non-color data, which just tells Cycles don't use this like a normal color map. It's something which is going to be affecting the material values. That's the best way I can sort of describe it. And now if we just plug this straight into the mix factor input, that will actually alter it. So you can see already there are parts of this where it's there's no gloss coming through at all. But you can see it's still far too glossy. So something I always add with this, I add in a color ramp node. I drop this in here, and then this white value here, this is going to become the maximum value of the glossiness. So if I just take that value there and I turn that down to 0.2, that's effectively going to be like taking this and turning this down to a 0.2 as well, okay? So if I just plug that back in there, you can see that we pretty much get the same result, but we also get the added benefit of the texture adjusting the specularity. Okay, so another thing we want is bump. That's what we're missing. It looks far too smooth, right? So I'm going to duplicate this image texture, and we're going to use our fabulous normal map. Now the normal map I'm going to set again to non-color data. Very important for the normal map, otherwise you will get horrible looking results. As I learned in my tutorial, that was advanced texturing tutorial, and I made that mistake. Very embarrassing. Anyways, we're going to add in a normal map. Whenever you're using an actual normal map, which is that purpley looking texture, you need to add in a normal map texture, a normal map node. Sorry, I'm getting twisting my words. The normal map node will take those values, it'll use it, convert it to tangent space or whatever. I have no idea what it's doing, but I know that you need it. And so you plug that into the diffuse and the glossy inputs like that. And you can see, having a look at our image here, look at the wall. Doesn't that look cool? It already is taking effect, but it's far too much because you can see that it's affecting the gloss like crazy. So a strength of 1 is usually always overkill. So if I turn that down to be something around about a 0.3, 0.2 value, I think let's go 0.25. I think that should be the sweet spot. Yeah, around about there. That looks pretty good. Awesome. Okay. So we're getting some nice reflections. We're getting the texture showing through. And so far, everything is looking good. But it looks like the walls are sort of like made of mucus or something. Like it doesn't look very natural, right? So now this is where we're going to get into the interesting stuff, which is where we're going to be adding in the displacement map. Sorry, the displacement modifier, whatever you want to call it. So first of all, I'm just going to run a quick render so we can see how everything looks now, and then we're going to add the displacement map later. Okay, so there we go. So now we can see everything is looking tip-top. Yeah, ready to go. Okay, so displacement mapping, let's go. So to do this, we're going to jump over to the modifier stacker here, and underneath the subsurf modifier, I'm going to add in the displacement modifier. And then with the displacement modifier, we of course need to give it a texture. So I'm going to click on new, and automatically you're going to get what looks like 1,000 jagged, I don't know, sort of like what you'd imagine like falling into hell is like, just millions of teeth trying to grab you. Gee, that's a scary thought. Ooh, all right. It's got a bit dark there. We're going to the texture panel, and we're going to select that displacement texture, and you can see that it is by default using a cloud texture, which is why we're getting this horrible result. So we're going to change this to be image, and then I'm going to click open, and we are going to use a texture that we already have, which is this one right here. So I'm going to click open, and there we go. Now the next thing that's really important we need to do is underneath texture coordinates, you need to change that to be UV. And there you go, it's automatically looking a lot better. So if I turn that strength down to be about 0.3, that is sort of the value that looks, I found to be one that looks pretty good. You can adjust it to what you sort of want. This will also, the subsurf amount that you apply before the displacement will drastically impact the result of the displacement. Like you can see as I increase this subsurf, you get more and more detail of that displacement showing through. For my final render, I think I only used 3. I'm just curious to see like how cool it looks if we add like higher levels. I actually don't know. There we go. Okay, so now you can see it's sort of like at the limits of the texture, but that's sort of what you get. So around about 4 is probably the maximum you're ever going to get from it. So just set that back to, I'm going to set it back to 3. 3 is fine for me. Okay, so let's have a look at it now with the displacement map. So a very simple little touch. But let's give it a quick render, and it should look a lot nicer. Ta-da! And so this is the before, and this is the after. So you can see that adding a displacement modifier has a very drastic result. It's just leaving up all that. It's leaving the modeling up to the texture really. So the texture is just deforming the mesh, and it's giving us some cool looking results. So now at this point, if you want to go nuts and sort of customize the sort of the shape of your cave, you're welcome to do that. I might do a little tiny little bit. What I sort of want to do is I want to make it look, I don't want it to like I'm going to place a crystal. That's the next step that we're going to do in a moment. I'm going to place a gem, like a crystal right here. But I want it to sort of look as though like it's not that visible from the entrance of the cave, you know? Like it's sort of a bit of a secret, you know what I mean? Bit of a, I don't know what you'd call it, a buried treasure, you know? Because the crystal is supposed to look valuable. That was actually what I originally planned for this whole tutorial. I planned to make a like a cave with a pirate's treasure in it. And so I was gonna put like money and like a treasure chest and like all this stuff. And so that's why originally, people that follow my Twitter, you'll see that I originally like tried to do something with coins, like just throwing coins on a table and just experimenting with that. And yeah, the result always came out terrible. Just the cave that I was trying to make, it just looked horrendous. So I spent a whole day and a half on it, and then I decided, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to try a whole new scene. So I opened this up, and automatically I was getting way better looking results by having like an opening at the end here and just starting from scratch. So that's a little tip for you. I know in my podcast recently I gave like advice on like what to do if you're stuck and you don't know what to do with your finished scene. And so I gave a bunch of advice. One of the advice I should have given is just start from scratch, because sometimes just scenes are not salvageable. Sometimes it's better just to go, you know what, screw it. And that's all right if you don't have a deadline. Which I actually sort of did for this tutorial. I planned to have it up by Wednesday or Tuesday, and then I said Wednesday, and then it finally said Thursday because of this exact problem. But anyways, all right, that's enough filler talk, enough chitter chatter. So the crystal is going to be sitting right here. Okay, cool. All right, I'm going to give this another quick little render right now on a new slot. Let's go ahead and hit render. And there we go. So this is what it looked like before and then after. So I've sort of just given it like a little bit of a sort of private space here. I don't know. You can do more altering later. Moving on, let's get on with the gem. Okay, so we want to be creating what looks like a gemstone. Okay, so this is, oh, well, this is Camtasia preview, but whatever. It's supposed to look like this. Okay, that's what we're aiming for. So this nice, you know, like sort of like a cartoony crystal blue sort of looking thing. Now, if you were to try to model your own gem, it would take you quite a while. Thankfully, though, there is an add-on just for that. So if you go to your add-ons here, it's all already in Blender. You go to Add Mesh and then click on Extra Objects, like that. And now, if you hit Shift-A, at the bottom here, you've got Extra Objects. And look at this. You've got gears, you've got math functions, you got stuff that I'll never use in my life. But look at this, gemstones. We're going to use a gem. Ta-da, ta-da. And if you push T, brings up the toolbar, you get more options. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to set the segments to be 5. Okay. I'm going to use just values that I found to work quite well. The radius, I'm going to set that to be 0.5. And this is so that we get like a nice bulge, like this tip of it is sort of pointing out of it a bit. Now the table radius, what is that? Let's try adjusting that. Oh yeah, that's like the base of it. I'll set that to 0.5. Table height, what's that? Oh yeah, let's go 0.4. 0.4 looks pretty good, I guess. And the pavilion height, let's go 0.6 for that. So that is like the tip of it, I guess. Maybe increase, maybe 0.7. Okay, that's I don't know. Yeah, that'll do. All right, cool. I'm going to rotate that now. Now that I've rotated, all those options have disappeared. So we're stuck with this. Oh, no. Okay, but it looks fine. Okay, so now what I want to do is I just want to move this up so that it's sitting on the grid floor like that. Origin point is at the base, which is always good. And that's cool. So we've got the gem. Yay. Well, that's great. But as well as that, we also want it to look a little bit cooler. You can't just have this huge old rock just sitting there by itself. So it has to look a little bit more integrated with the scene. So what I did is I added like a whole bunch of shards sticking out of it, okay? So the way that we're gonna do that is I'm gonna add in a cylinder, right? And I'm gonna set the vertices to be 6. And I'm gonna move this over like so. And in edit mode, I'm going to move this up, place it on its origin point right there, and I'm going to scale this down to be roughly this size, okay? And then what I'm going to do is just grab this and extrude that up to be about there, and then hit Alt-M. Alt-M seems to not have any function here. Oh, that's right. I think that's like the... Oh, it does work. Okay. Alt-M at center. Yeah, like my recording program, if you use the right Alt-M, I don't know. Jeez, it's just annoying. As I've said before, whenever you're recording, something just doesn't work as planned. Anyways, all right. Now, I'm actually going to be duplicating this a lot and creating sort of like different shard shapes. But the first thing we need to do is we need to UV unwrap this because we're actually going to be applying a texture to these crystals to make them look a little bit more like glass. So if I just go into edge select mode, I just grab these edges right there, and then this one too. I'm going to hit Mark Seam, and then go to the UV Image Editor, and UV Unwrap, and there you go. Bob's your uncle. Maybe increase that a little bit more. Yeah, something like that. Okay, that's cool. The whole point of this is, well, the reason we do this now is so that we don't have to suffer later. Because yeah, I found it's just one of those things. If you duplicate a whole bunch of stuff and you do all the modeling and then later on you realize, whoops, forgot to UV unwrap it, and then you have to do each one individually. It's annoying. Speaking of which, we actually need there to be 2 materials for this, because you can see from our, you know what I should do? I should just actually load up the final image right here. You can see it full screen. There you go. You can see that at the bottom of it, there's this light, this blue light, which is shining up from underneath it. And then the top part is made of this glass crystal sort of thing, right? So the base of this needs to be a different material to the rest of it. So to save time later on again, I'm just gonna add a new material. I'm gonna call this top one Crystal. And then hitting the microphone, hopefully you can't hear that. And then underneath that, I'm gonna add this Underlight, like that, okay? And I'm just gonna, let's just make this viewport blue so we can actually tell, and I'm gonna hit assign. Okay, cool, so that's good. Awesome. All right, so now we can actually start doing some stuff. So we need to essentially just create like a ring around this crystal, around this gem. And if I go into vertice select mode and then click on this, what do you call it, the widget tool, and then go to local transformation, this is going to be handy later on. I can, if you turn off proportional editing, I can pull this up. Okay, maybe scale it up. There we go. Okay, something like that. All right. And then I'm going to duplicate it, create another one over here. And this one, this is where you can sort of get creative, you know. Scale it down, pull it out a bit. Okay. Now, each one of these, you'll notice that this doesn't exactly look like shards, right? Like our final image, it looks sort of like plates of glass, you know. But there's going to be a cool step that I'm going to show you in a moment, and it's going to allow us to do all this cool stuff to these individually, and make it look like shards. Okay, so yeah, just get your creative boots on, whatever, and you start moving it around. I'm gonna pause the recording while I do this. Ta-da! Okay, so that actually didn't take very long, like 2 minutes. But anyways, so we've got something that looks like this. Okay, cool, but it doesn't look like the shards that we had planned, right? So this is the shards here. Now, check this out. If we go to the modifier stacker and we add in a Decimate Modifier, this is something you probably maybe have never used before because it doesn't really have much of a use. I don't know what use it has, but check this out. If you turn down this ratio, look at that. It starts like snapping away at this, at our mesh here, and starts like collapsing it, like dissolving it to create, yeah, I don't know what purpose it has. You know, I'm sure somebody knows. But I use it for this, and it looks cool. I'm pretty sure it's like a creative tool. Like, by the way, if you want to save time on all this, instead of having to add the modifier to each one of these individually, hit Control L, modifiers, and there you go. And you can like vary the amount of this, so you can get different looking shards for each one. That's why it's cool. But yeah, I'm pretty sure this is just like a. Maybe there's some use of it for like the game development. I have no idea, but I just use it for like doing like twisting meshes and like just making them look all warped and everything. Like if you actually use it on this thing, you can see how it sort of works with more versions. Like it just gradually just starts like dissolving the mesh down to its like bare minimum. So it's kind of cool. I don't know what it does, but it's very cool for creative purposes like this. So, ta-da! Doesn't that look cool? Awesome. All right, now, one final thing. For our main gem here, I'm going to add a bevel, okay? And let's just turn the width to be about there and these segments to be about there. And that's just going to allow it to look a little bit softer and get a little bit more of that refraction and all that kind of stuff. So something like that, and there we go. Now I'm going to select everything, hit Control P, and then hit parent to object keep transform. And that means that now if I move this, all the crystals come with it. Yay. All right, so bring back everything. Drag this old crystal down to be right in front of your camera. And look at that, look, it takes up like the whole camera. All right, so pull it down. All right, so scaling it down. Something about there. Now I actually want this to be facing the camera a little bit. If you double tap R, by the way, maybe you didn't know you could do that, but that's trackball. Look at that, it's kind of cool. So something like that. Okay, now in that case, if I turn on proportional editing, see, it's sort of weird when you've got the displacement turned on as well, because when you go out of edit mode, things look a little bit different. Now you can turn that on if you want, like so that the displacement actually affects the edit mode. But then as you move around stuff in the edit mode, it's like really slow. So it had to, what do you call it? It's a two-edged sword? No? It's a something. I'm not a wordsmith, you know? It's something I've accepted. I'm an artiste. All right, scale this down. All right. All right, just try and pull that to be about there. Okay, cool. And drag that down. Excellent. I think that's looking pretty cool. I think that's going to be great. Awesome. All right, so now comes the part where we actually adjust the material for this crystal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this view, and we're going to be using the node editor to adjust the materials. But first things first, with the world here selected, just holding down control, just slice, okay? And just disconnect the world from this stuff over here. And what that'll do is it'll make the background completely black. Whereas before it was this blinding white color, okay? So just make it completely black. Now switching back to object mode, select our main gem here, whatever. And actually we need to give it the crystal, first of all, because we gave it to these shards here. We gave them the two materials, but this one we haven't. So select underlight, and right here, select all of those and hit assign. Okay, cool. So for the underlight, it needs to be an emission and give it a strength of 50, which is really, really high. And then give it a color of something I found around about a point. Actually, that's pretty good. Something about, I use the HSV, hue saturation value. I find that to be a lot more effective. A hue of like 0.550 and saturation of 0.9 gives it like sort of an aqua, not fully blue, but sort of a coolish sort of look. And that's the light which is going to be shining through the gem. So that's very important. Okay, now for the crystal itself, the actual crystal material, this is where it actually gets important. Okay, so listen up. The surface, we're going to change that to be, the surface type to be glass, okay? No surprises there. That's probably the closest thing that matches a crystal, right? But what we want to do is we want to give it a look of, like if you go online to Google Images, I probably can't show you because I'll probably break some copyright law. But if you just type in crystal and try and find some like close-ups of some actual minerals, and you can see they have like this almost glass sort of bubbly sort of texture to it. So what I did was I went on CG Textures and I found an image, which I'm going to add in right now, which is ice, okay? So you can download these textures. I'm putting them in a zip so you can download it. So I'm taking this ice texture here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it through a color ramp like this, and then with the color ramp connect that to the roughness input. So the roughness defines, like if you have a look at this preview window over here, if you turn up the roughness, that just makes everything looks like the refractions, everything looks softer. So it's like frosted glass. But if you power that with the texture, then you get this cool sort of look, like parts of it that are clear and parts of it that are frosted. It looks really nice. So if we just adjust this, the black value, like if we just bring this black value in, more parts of it will be clear, and then the white parts will be completely frosted over. So we sort of just want to play around with this. But check this out. Boom. Ta! Look at that. So now we can actually have a look at it in its rendered view mode. So I sort of want to bring this black value in a little bit. Did I UV unwrap the main gem? I don't think I actually did I? No, I didn't. Okay, I knew I was forgetting something. There was something. So I UV unwrapped all the shards, so that was good. But I haven't UV unwrapped this. So this is pretty easy. I'm just going to select, you know, a seam around the back of this. It doesn't really matter all that much. Hit mark seam, UV image editor, UV unwrap, and I'll just scale this up so that it sort of fits this grid floor a bit better. That's good. Okay, now let's have a look at it. We should actually be able to see it now. Okay, can we? Jeez, good grief. Looks horrendous. Okay, maybe pull that in. Okay. I'm not entirely sure, but it looks, we're getting weird stuff there. Maybe, I have a feeling one of these shards is sort of overlapping in the background. Oh, maybe it's the bevel. The bevel itself. Let's apply the scale, okay. Let's turn down this bevel. Or maybe just turn it off for this next part. Let's just try turning it off, alright? No, that hasn't really affected it. Alright, what if I hide you guys? No? Alright, well maybe that's just the actual texture, the image texture, whatever. Alright, just set that to non-color. No, we need the color then. Do we? Huh. Set that to non-color data and you actually get better results. Okay, that's cool. I didn't know that for my final render, but whatever. Okay. So it's very hard to see it from this. Like it's, I don't know why, but it just looks strange from where I'm looking at it. It's not at all what I was expecting. This is what happens when you record a tutorial. Oh, okay. Increase the IOR to be 0.65. I don't know if that made any difference. Maybe not. Dang it. Something that was going to fix everything. All right. Maybe the underlight is a little bit too bright. Yeah, maybe that's it. Probably not. Set this to 20. Oh, okay. All right. Maybe it was just too strong and I couldn't actually see what was actually sort of happening. Okay. All right. Okay. So now let's just play with this a little bit more. So basically, the more I drag this black value over, the less of that frostedness I get. Okay. So if I just sort of adjust it nicely and sort of put it in a right place, then we'll get like a nice mix between the two. And if I can turn down this pure white value, then we won't get like a 100% frosted sort of look. I don't know if we want that or not. Anyways, this is one of those things that worked really well and instantly when I was experimenting and doing my scene. And then you record, and then everything just it just goes terribly. But anyways, all right, that should be fine. Yeah, I hope. All right, let's give it a test render. Yeah, test render time with the rest of the scene. Okay, so this blue light should be powerful enough. Oh, I know what I forgot to do. Okay, so the glass. If we just leave it as glass, the light isn't actually going to shine through the crystal. You're going to get a lot of caustics coming through the scene, and we don't want caustics, right? We don't want that. That weird, you get fireflies. It's terrible, right? So what you want to do is you want to add a mix shader and you want to combine it with a transparent shader. Okay, and what we're going to do, hear me out, is if we add a light path node, if we take the shadow ray, the diffuse ray, and the glossy ray, and then put that into here, then what that will do is it will use it will treat the material as transparent for everything else in the scene except as it's viewed to the camera. Okay, so for example, let me show you what that does. If I grab, we need to add in a math node to combine them. Oh man, this tutorial's coming up on an hour already. No. Anyways, so I'm just getting two math nodes with add like this. I don't know if there's a better way to do this. Maybe somebody can tell me, but this is just how I've done things, and it has always come out working pretty good. So let me just have a look at that again. I don't know if it'll actually make much difference from this view. It has actually kind of, hasn't it? Huh. All right. So maybe I'll bring this back then. Okay. Alrighty then. I'm honestly not really sure. I guess because maybe the light was sort of bouncing around inside the glass and it was giving it this weird sort of look. But that does look a lot nicer. Bring back those other shards in the background there. Okay, so you want to get it so there's a little bit of texture and a little bit coming through. Okay, that's good. And let's turn back on the bevel, see how that affects it. That's good. All right, excellent. Okay, now we can actually do the render. Nice. Very smooth, Andrew. Go ahead, give it a run. It'll probably take a little bit longer now, but let's do a before and after again. Hit render. Let's see how it looks. Hey! Look at that. It's looking pretty cool already. Something I didn't do is I forgot to plug the world back in. Yeah, hey, when you forget to plug the world back in. Huh. Yeah. I wonder if God ever does that. Who knows? Go back to the node editor, world view. Plug it back in, hit render, and we should actually get the sunlight sort of shining through as well. So let's have a look at it with that as well. Awesome, there we go. So it's looking cool. So next part, we're gonna add in some glowing mushrooms. Yeah, that's gonna look cool, right? So the glowing mushrooms, Very easy to do. We create a bunch of mushrooms and we make them glow, and then we use particle systems to displace them on the floor right here around the crystal. So, excuse me. So yeah, let's jump to a new layer and let's start creating some shrooms. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a stem. Okay, not a stem cell, a stem. All right. So we're going to grab this cylinder, and I'm going to go into edit mode, put it at its origin point right there, and I'm going to scale this down, 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 down. And I want the real world height of this to be like 10 centimeters. So you can see it's still 20. So I turn that down to, oh yeah, okay. And then I bring this, turn off proportional editing. Bring that up. Okay, now we're around about right. Okay, 9 centimeters, that's good. Okay, so we want to, first of all, delete the faces on this cylinder here. And because we want to be able to like bend around the stem and stuff like that, I'm just going to create 3 loops right there, like that. Okay, and then to create the actual mushroom head, if we duplicate that little edge loop there, then make it its own separate object. Okay, and then grab that and extrude it outwards. This is going to be like the maximum sort of radius for the mushroom. Okay, and then if I just create a face right there. Oh, hang on a second, my wife is sending me a text message. Oh no, she was making me dinner, and I said I was going to be home late because I'm still recording the tutorial, and she's made dinner already. Isn't that great? Anyways, so I'm going to create some loop cuts, right? You know what, I'm going to pause. I got to send back a text. I got to be nice, don't I? All right, done. Cool, sent the message. Back on track. So we've got this little umbrella looking thing going on here. So what I'm going to do, turn on proportional editing and set the proportional fall off to be sharp. And then if I push G and then got to scale that mouse down. There we go. Now we can create what looks like an umbrella. Okay. But this is our shroom. So if I hit Control 1, let's set that render to that. Okay. And then go smooth shading. You can see that's our little mushroom head there. Okay. Now this is the getting into the important stuff. So what you want to do is you want to add a new material, and we're going to call this mushroom top. Okay. And for this material, material type, it's going to be emission, and I want to give it a sort of an aqua blue color like that. But you want to turn down the saturation. I found from looking at reference photos online of actual mushrooms that glow. Did you know that actual mushrooms glow? People said that in on Facebook. They're like, oh, so this is like a fantasy scene where mushrooms glow. I was like, no, man, mushrooms actually glow in the real world. Look it up on Google Images. Type in glowing mushroom. It's real, man. It's out there. Anyways, I find that the top of the mushroom is like less saturated and less bright, but then underneath it is like more bright. And the stem of it is a little bit bright, okay? So that's the sort of look that we're gonna go for, okay? So less saturated on top, and then underneath it, let's just duplicate that. Duplicate, save us some time. Mushroom bottom, and then I'm gonna set this emission to be 2, and then I'm gonna make the saturation a little bit heavier, okay? That's good. And then underneath that, let's go. Oh, actually, no, we don't need a material for that. That's actually this part here. Okay. All right, so now we've got 2 materials. Now we're gonna add a Solidify modifier. And the whole reason we're gonna do this is so we can give it some thickness, okay? But the thickness is not really what I'm interested in. I'm interested in using this function right here, material index offset, which allows me to apply a material to one side of this mesh. Okay, so if I'll just give this a different color so we can actually see the difference. So now it's using this bottom text, this bottom, mushroom bottom, for what's inside this Solidify, so this side of it, okay? So that's allowing us to do that. Now for this actual stem here, set it to smooth. It's a little bit thick, so make it like that, that's good. And then I'll give it mushroom top, and let's set that to mushroom stem. And then for the, I think the brightness, I think it looks better if you can't really see the stem that well. So something like that, and then maybe just turn down the, yeah, I found like the stem usually looks pretty white in the photos. So something like that. Okay, and then I'm gonna apply the subsurf and apply the Solidify Modifier, and then make both of these 1. Ta-da! Okay. So, I mean, we're mainly just going to be looking at it from this part here. We're not actually going to be seeing underneath it, but it's important because that part is going to be casting the light down onto the rest of the floor. So that's why it's important. Now, if we just have this one mushroom just displaced all over the floor, it's going to look very, very fake to the viewer because it's just one duplicated mushroom and the viewer can spot that really easily. So what we want to do is we want to create some variations to the mushroom, right? So we do that by like... if I just grab this proportional fall off, make this side a little bit droopy or something, you know, something like that, and then let's duplicate it again. Like this is my vanilla one. I learned that at the Blender conference. Vanilla means like the basic, like the standard, you know. So if I can make this stem, a lot of them have like this a stem that looks like this, like it's sort of like just coming out the side a little bit. So I find that it looks kind of cool if you do that. You get this sort of like mushroom on a bit of a look there. And then I'm going to make this one a little bit taller. Like so. And you can play around with it. I'm going to pause the recording and I'm going to create a few more variations. Okay, so there we go. It's like 3 minutes of work, whatever. Just got a whole bunch of weirdish looking mushrooms. Probably can go to a bit more effort if you want, but that's enough. Enough that it's not gonna, you're not gonna be able to tell too many that look too similar to each other. That's the point of it anyway. Maybe I make this one a little bit smaller, this one a bit bigger. I don't know, still making variations. Whatever. All right, so now I've got the mushrooms. I'm gonna create a group by hitting Control G. Let's give it a name, like shrooms, that'll do. And then, now that we've done that, we are now ready to start using it as a particle, right? So give it, with the cave selected, add a new particle system and go to hair, set the type to hair, and then click advanced. And then the most important thing you want to do is you want to set the render to be the group of shrooms. So now each one of these particles, which you can't really see at the moment, they're sort of there they are. They are the shrooms. So now if I click on rotation, they're still not pointing up the right direction. Let's go rotation and then set the rotation type to be none. And now they actually point up in the direction that I want, which is kind of cool. It doesn't allow you to sort of get that random rotation, but it's a lot of effort to sort of get that working. It's got to be a better way to do that. It's something I got to put through to the developers or something. But to get like random rotation of the particles, you got to like twist them 90 degrees and it's all... Yeah, anyways, but none is fine for this. So anyway, so now that I've done that, you will notice these particles are everywhere, including on the roof and on the outside of the mesh, which is not what we want. We actually want them to be just around here. Like we want to make it sort of look like around this crystal, like this dark area here. This is where the shrooms are growing, but up here in the background where there's too much light, the mushrooms don't grow very well. So they've got to be down here, like in the damp sort of area here. So the way we do that is by adding a new vertex group, and we shall call it shrooms. And then let's just turn it off so we can actually move around. Yeah, having it turned on the whole time makes the viewport really slow. Control Tab. Now we're in weight paint mode, and what we can do, set that strength down a little bit, is we can start painting areas in our scene where we actually want the shrooms to grow. So this is pretty easy to do. Obviously the blue areas are 0, and the red areas are where it's most visible. So I want there to be some in the foreground, it's very important, and I want there to be like a few just on like this edges here, you know. Oh, you don't want to go like up vertical too far, but something around about there should be pretty good. And something you want to check, whenever you're painting from the camera, yeah, you always get this problem. If you're painting from the view of the camera, it'll catch stuff that's in the background, which you obviously don't want. So I'm just going to paint this out. Okay, so point, yeah, about there, that's pretty good. Okay, excellent. So now that I've done the weight painting, now we go back to the particle system, and then down here underneath vertex groups, I'm going to click on shrooms. And now, oops, if we turn on the particle system for the shrooms, oh look, they're in the wrong place. Okay, so this is a problem. It's a bug in Blender, I'm fairly certain. I actually reported it just recently, but you need to click Use Modifier Stack, and then it will actually appear where you want it to, but you shouldn't have to do that. Anyways, okay, so now we've got them appearing where we want them to. I'm going to turn down the emission amount to be 600. We don't want there to be that many, but what I want there to be is I want there to be little bunches of them, because I found from looking at photos that they often are bunched together. Okay, so the way we're going to do that is by using children. Ta-da! So I'm going to set the children amount to be 5. So that for each one of these actual mushrooms, there's going to be 5 surrounding it. Okay, and I'm going to give them a random height. So let's give them a random height of like 0.8. Okay, and then I'm going to give it a length of 0.8 and then a threshold of 0.2. So that you get like one big one out of the bunch, which turns out to be pretty good. And then the radius, I find like a radius of, let's go 0.06. You want that you want it to look like little patches of mushrooms, which it sort of is at the moment, which is good. Okay, and the other thing you want to do is you want to get the size of it right, so you can play with the size here. You also want to turn up the random size as well. Turn that up to sort of like as big as it can go. And that should, if it's not too big, that should actually look pretty good. Now, one thing I do want to do is I want there to be some in the foreground, because I want there to be, with the depth of field, I want the depth of field to sort of make these glowing mushrooms, which are in the foreground. So if I just bring up this ground here. Okay, like that. Then there we go. All right, now let's turn on the displacements. We can actually see that. Okay, that's this looks like little waves or whatever, but yeah, whatever. Is the strength too high? Nah. Maybe strength 0.25. Yeah, it's a bit better. Okay, and then if I turn on weight paint mode, all right. So we got to add some area in front of the camera. Oh, for goodness sake, this is pathetic. Come on. Just want to have a look right here. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to paint directly in front of the camera right here. Okay, and there we go. Okay. Almost. Oh, gee, this is boring, isn't it? It's got to be boring to watch. Just listening to me talk and try and work out the scene. All right, turn on the shrooms, and there we go. All right, so now you can also, by the way, play with the seed value. Yeah, just like that. And we can sort of get some different patterns of the shrooms just showing up. But that looks pretty good. I think they're perhaps a little bit too big, so just going to turn them down. I played with the size of these so much, by the way. Like, if you're curious why I'm keep going back, playing forward, this is just how you do it. Like, you render it and you find that they're too big and there's too much whatever, and then you just try it again. But anyways, that's actually turning out to be pretty good. What was I going to do? Oh, yes. The shrooms here, I'm actually going to rotate them just so that you can actually see the bendiness of them, because I noticed that from the view of the camera, you can't actually see that. There we go. Now you can actually see the bendiness. Okay, cool. So I'm going to give it a render now. It should take a lot longer to render because I think each one of these are quite a few polys. But anyways, give it another render and let's have a look at how it looks once it is finished. All right, so there you go. We've got the mushrooms in the scene, and yeah, it actually looks pretty good. I actually thought I would have to re-render that many a times, but it's actually turned out pretty well, so that's good. One thing I might do though is I might just increase the this whatever's viewable in the foreground, just so that I can get some yeah, just some cool sort of, oh no, now there's sort of crystals disappearing. Man, come on. It's really hard to get this right. Come on. Look at this big wave coming through. What is that wave from? Man, I swear. Sometimes it just doesn't work. What am I actually looking at right now? Just a simple adjustment, man. Come on. Gosh. All right, so that didn't work at all. Let's just reverse everything that I just did. And I think it was better the way it was before. Yeah, yay, great. Maybe I'll just make the foreground appear like in this side only. Because I think this side can actually deal with it. Okay, let's bring that down. Okay, there we go. All right, because I want there to be some mushrooms in the foreground that are going to be out of focus, right? That's the whole point of it. Gee, all right. So we've got the mushrooms on the floor now. Now the next step is to add the stalagmites. Okay. Now, for my final scene, actually along the floor here, I actually created some rocks as well. So if you have a look at my final one, they're just really, really low poly, basic looking rocks. I'll show you what the actual rocks look like right here. Just little cubes that I've just deformed in weird ways, and I place them in the exact same way that I placed those the mushrooms just before. So go ahead, you're welcome to do that. You'll have to, of course, create another vertex group just for the rocks and paint just along the entire floor there. But you're welcome to go ahead and do that. I'm going to skip that because I'm sure you guys can figure that out for yourselves. So the next part is to add these stalagmites. So they're pretty easy. They're just those icicle looking things. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a plane, scale this down, and I'm going to delete this top face here. And then if I turn on a subsurf modifier, you can see that we have a, whoops, look, it's an icicle, so easy, or a stalagmite if you want to call it that. All right, and again, I'm just going to create a few variations of it, not too many this time. Something like that. And there we go. Okay. All right. So I've got 4 variations. I'm going to hit Control G, and let's see if I can get the correct spelling. Stalagmites. I think that's right. I've had to like find out a way to remember how to say it, so I just kind of think of stalagmites. That's how I think. Jeez. All right, go back to the cave. Back to the cave. And gonna just basically duplicate the particle system that we've already got there. So first of all, let's just turn it off. Okay. And then let's set this there. Okay, and make sure you click that 2 next to it so it actually becomes its own separate thing, right? And for this one, we of course need to give it its own let's just turn down the subdivisions. That'll probably help. And turn off this for now. So we need to give it its own vertex group just for the stalagmites. So it needs to be on the roof. Stalagmites, okay. And so for this, I'm just going to go into top view, and then let's go to strength. Okay. All right. And I'm just going to start painting. So just painting along the roof of wherever you want there to be those icicle things. The stalagmites to hang down from. I don't know whose idea was it to call it stalagmite. Jeez, I don't know. Historical, I'm sure. Some bearded dude, some explorer. He's probably had a phlegmy throat or something, and stalagmite. What was that, sir? A stalagmite. He's probably trying to say something else. And they just wrote it down in a book as stalagmite. I don't know. You got to fill in this time with something, don't you? So I got to talk about random stuff. There we go. All right, so it's painted pretty well. There's a little bit of this area here where it's not, but most of it's pretty good. Cool. So that's labeled correctly. And then down here, I select the correct group, turn off children, and then under vertex group, I enable stalagmite. And then we should, if we, oh, we haven't actually got it enabled. That would probably help. There we go. Now they're hanging from the ceiling. How about that? Pretty cool, right? Now I'm going to increase the count to be 4,000. And I'm going to increase the size to be, that's too much. How about 3? And set it to random. There we go. Pretty good. Awesome. So that is pretty much it, I think. If we, let's have a look at this. If we want, this is where you can actually do the finishing touches and make sort of, make your cave have its own, you know, personal sort of flavor to it, you know. So I want there to maybe be like a few more areas where it's sort of like hanging down a little bit. So I'm just going to do some work on that. So I'm going to pause the video and I'm just going to do a little bit of adjustment to the cave and then we'll come back. All right, there we go. So I've just added a whole bunch of like bumps to the roof and like to the floor and pulled some of these walls in. And we should hopefully now have a cool looking render. One thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to, before we do the final render, I'm going to set the camera to have something to focus on so we get some depth of field, something I've been talking about for a while. So I want to focus on the gem, this part right here. That is what needs to be in focus. So the name of it is gem. So just type in G, gem, there we go, that's the point of focus. And now of course for the aperture, I'm going to use f-stops because I like that. And I'm going to use 2.3. The lower you set that to, the more out of focus things become. So that's all well and good. Everything is fine. Now, one other thing before I do another final render, I want to be able to add a glow just to this crystal here, as well as a glow just to what's outside the door. So the way that we do that is for this crystal, this gem here, I'm going to give it a pass index. So a pass index is going to allow us in the compositor to apply an effect just to something with a number other than 0. So if I set this to 1, then I can apply an effect just to this object. And then if I was to set this to 2, then I can apply an effect to just this object. So because all these gems, I want them all to have the same effect, I'm just going to give them all the same pass index of 1. And I don't think there's a way you can do it like all at once. So I'm doing them all individually right now. I'm hoping it's going to be fine. Okay, that's good. Excellent. And then once you've done that, you need to go over here to the render layer, and underneath passes, you need to enable object index pass. If you don't do that and then you render it, you'll have to re-render it and then click that. So as well as that, because I want there to be a glow outside the door, I'm now also going to enable a pass for the environment as well. So now that I've done that, underneath your sampling, I'm going to increase the sampling to be 400. For my final one, I did 1,000. But just for the sake of this, 400 is going to be perfectly fine. For the light bounces, I only used like 2 and then maximum 5, and it turned out fine. And for the performance, 256 by 256, that should be fine as well. So with that all done, I'm going to go ahead and give it a final render, and then we'll jump over to the compositor and hopefully do some cool stuff. All right, so this is the final render. And it is ready to be fiddled with in the compositor. Something I did change, I changed the f-stop to be 3.2 instead of 2.3. Also adjusted the sunlight a little bit just so that it wasn't so harsh on that wall there. But as you can see, most of everything else is pretty much as it was. So now to jump over to the compositor. So some things that we want to do in the compositor. It's actually kind of cool. This is the fun part, right? We want to add some glow to the crystal first of all. So as I did before, what we created before was that ID mask just for that object. So if I go converter, ID mask, then I get this right here. And what I do is I take this output from this index OB, which is index object, which is what we enabled in the render panel down here. So now if I take that and put that in here, now I just set this number to whatever the crystal was, which was 1. So now that I've done that, this now gives me a nice sort of, what do you call it? Yeah, this, whatever you can see there. It gives you, it's an outline of whatever the object was. So now what I can do is if I add excuse me, chewing gum. If I add a mix node and then drag that into the factor input, then take the image and then put that into the bottom input, now you can see that I get the actual crystal against a white background. Now I don't want the background to be white, I want it to be black. So I just turn that down to black and there we go. Great. So now we've got the crystal by itself. I can now add in a glare effect. just like this. So if I increase the streaks to be 8, yeah, that looks fantastic. And I'm also going to turn up the color modules as well as the iterations. And I think that should be pretty good. Now, I want to turn the mix all the way up to 1 so that we only get the effect. 0 gives you both, and then -1 gives you just the original. So setting it to 1 will give us just the effect. And that's important because we want to apply that with the rest of the scene. Now, as well as that, I also want to do pretty much the same thing to the outdoor, what's outside this window over there. So what I'm going to do is add or basically duplicate this glare node, and then take the output from the environment. I'll show you what the environment looks like, by the way. Just like that. It looks like just like that. So so now with that, look at that. Jesus Christ is risen. I can increase the the streaks. Yeah, something like that. That should be pretty good. And yeah, color modules, that's pretty good. Good, excellent. So now what I'm going to do is combine both of those together, just like this. Whoops. Okay, and then set this to add. And there you go. So we now have both effects together. Now I actually want this top effect, this background one, to be not as strong. So I'm turning down. Oh, it's the wrong order then. So I'm turning, there we go. Okay, so you just turn down the add value, make sure that it's in the bottom, and then you can turn down that value there. And now we want to combine this with the rest of the scene. So to do that, I just take that mix add input, combine the two together, and there you go. Look at that. Supernova coming from the door. So I'll turn down, I think I'll turn down the length of these streaks from that. I'll turn down the glow effect from both of them actually, because they're both coming on a little bit heavy, I think. So this, if I alter just this one, this is going to adjust just the amount of this outdoor glow, but this one here will adjust the amount of both of their glows. So I'm just sort of turning both of them down because I don't want it to be too overdone, okay? Which is something that I have a tendency to do, but I'm trying to avoid that. So something like this. Hang on, I went up. Okay, so something like that's pretty good. All right, now I also want to turn down the amount that's coming from the door. So actually it wasn't too bad as it was actually. I think that should be okay. No, it's too much. Turn it just a little bit down. There we go. Awesome. All right. Now the next big thing I want to do is I want to add in a atmospheric fall off so that it looks like in the distance there is some mist, like some moisture in the air. And this is really important because as a sunset scene with the sun shining directly into the cave, it's likely that you'd see a lot of particles and stuff. So although Blender doesn't have volumetric rendering yet, we can fake it in the compositor by using a map value node. And then you take the Z input, put that into the map value node. You know what? I'm going to clean this up because a lot of people have told me that I should start using groups. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay. Awesome. That's going there. That's going there. That's going there. Oh no, there's a group within a group. We can't have that. All right, let's pull that out. Oh, what's going on here? I got red lines. Okay, there shouldn't be red lines. There we go. Okay, so now we've got just a group. That's good. Awesome. So having a look at just this view here, if I turn down the size of this to be 0.01 like that, now you can see that you've got the Z depth of the camera. So it's a little bit fuzzy, but it'll work fine for this. And what I want to do is I want to turn down the offset so that the mist starts just after the crystal. So something about there. And then what you want to do is take a mix node and then plant this firmly into the factor input, and then take this and put this into the top input. And then if you set this to be screen, then what this will do is it will now take this color, whatever color I set this to, and that will now become the color of the fog. Now, if you're wondering why the background has suddenly gone all crazy looking, that's because we need to enable use maximum. So yeah, use maximum is enabled, and now it's all good. So the color of this, I want to give it the same color as the sun. So something like an orangey color like this. There we go, that's pretty good. And the lower, because this is set to screen, if I just want to turn down the amount of that, the thickness of that, I can just turn down this value here. This slider just acts as a sort of like a thickness. But something like that should be pretty good. And the next thing, almost the final thing I want to add is a color balance node. And this is going to allow us to do some fine color grading. So what I want to do is I want to make this less aqua looking. So the mid-tones, I want to make it look a little bit more blue. So something like that. And then I want to make the sun look a little bit more orangey red, pinkish almost. So something like that. What if I set it to pink? How would that look? Yeah, it looks a bit like that. Which is, I don't know if that's like accurate or better, or yeah, maybe it should be a little bit redder. Because you want to get a nice color scheme going. So blue against red, they're like opposites on the color wheel. So red is down here and you've got aqua up there. So if we can get this to be a nice rich sort of red looking color, the backdrop, then there you go. It actually does look, well, it looks overkill at the moment, but it does actually have a pleasing sort of color palette to it. Anyways, you can fool around with that as much as you like. I think I'm sort of done with it. What I'm going to do finally though is of course add in a nice happy vignette. So the way we do that is a lens distortion with a blur node. We connect the two like this, distort, 100, set to 1, and then blur, set this to fast Gaussian, relative, and then Y, I'll just set this to 10%. This distortion, you actually don't need to connect to anything. And if we just set this to mix, and then set this into the bottom input, and then set this to multiply, then now this will act as basically we've now got black edges around it. So that's essentially guiding your eyes to not be around the outside, but more to what's on the inside. It's on the inside that counts, isn't it? So you don't want it to go 100% black, but a little bit. A little bit's always better than nothing, I find. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm not really too happy with how the sunlight is like blooming in there, so I could probably turn that down a little bit with this perhaps, and maybe the length of those rays, they're a little bit much as well. But if we try that, oh yeah, there we go. It does look that's just sort of it's almost wiped it out, hasn't it? I want there to be some. So come on, a little bit. There we go. All right, so that's not too bad now. But there you go. That pretty much concludes the tutorial, guys. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something from it. As you can see, you can do a lot with this sort of premise. So I'm keen to see your own caves, like your own unique looking caves. So if you can take this tutorial and then like create like a cool, awesome looking cave, then that'd be sweet. I'll show you, yeah, finish with the final image here. So this was, of course, how can I make that? Oh no, it's disappeared. Yeah, this was of course my final image, but yeah, I'm really curious to see what you guys create. So if you create something cool, please post it in the comments on Blender Guru. I'd love to check it out. And yeah, just make something unique. I'll post a link to some reference photos of caves so you can have a look at all the different variations and stuff there are. Maybe come up with a story like some pirates, or I don't know. I don't want to put ideas in your head, but I'm always interested in like, you know, seeing what other people create with the tutorials. So yeah, that concludes the tutorial. Hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, have fun. Bye.